The Texas sun hung low over San Antonio on a sweltering August afternoon in 2019, casting long shadows across the parking lot of Texas Children's Hospital. Jennifer Hayes stepped out of her silver Honda Civic, her navy blue scrubs already clinging to her skin from the oppressive humidity. She had been a pediatric nurse for 12 years, but the weight of this particular shift already pressed heavily on her shoulders before she even walked through the automatic glass doors. Inside the hospital, the familiar scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint aroma of cafeteria food greeted her as she made her way to the pediatric cardiac unit on the 4th floor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the sound of soft beeping from various monitors created a symphony of medical urgency that had become background noise to her trained ears. Jennifer was 34 years old, with shoulder-length auburn hair that she always tied back in a practical ponytail during her shifts. Her green eyes held a warmth that immediately put children at ease, even in their most frightened moments. She had chosen pediatric nursing not just as a career, but as a calling. Inspired by her younger brother, who had battled leukemia as a child and survived thanks to dedicated medical professionals. As she reached the nurse's station, her colleague Patricia Wilson looked up from a stack of patient charts, her weathered face showing the exhaustion of a double shift. Patricia was 52, a veteran nurse with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses that perpetually hung from a beaded chain around her neck. "Jennifer, thank God you're here," Patricia said, her Texas drawl more pronounced than usual from fatigue. "We've got a new admission in room 412, 7-year-old boy, Dylan Cooper. Severe congenital heart defect that somehow went undiagnosed until now. He collapsed at school yesterday during recess." Jennifer felt her stomach tighten. Undiagnosed heart conditions in children were always devastating, particularly when they reached critical stages. She picked up Dylan's chart, her eyes scanning the medical notes quickly. The diagnosis was clear: tetralogy of Fallot, with severe pulmonary stenosis. The child needed open heart surgery, and soon. "What's the family situation?" Jennifer asked, already knowing from years of experience that the medical challenge was only part of the story. Patricia leaned in, lowering her voice even though the hallway was relatively empty. "Single mother, Rachel Cooper. Works 2 jobs, one as a waitress at Denny's on Interstate 10, another cleaning offices at night. No insurance that covers this kind of surgery. Dr. Philip Anderson already talked to her about the costs. We're looking at somewhere between $175,000 and $200,000. Jennifer closed her eyes briefly. She had seen this scenario play out dozens of times. Families faced with impossible choices, children whose lives hung in the balance, not because medicine couldn't save them, but because money stood in the way. "Where is she now?" Jennifer asked. "In the room with her son. She hasn't left his side since they arrived yesterday evening." Jennifer took a deep breath and walked down the corridor toward room 412. The pediatric cardiac unit tried to maintain a cheerful atmosphere despite the serious nature of the conditions treated there. Colorful murals of cartoon characters decorated the walls, and each room had been painted in soft, soothing colors. But no amount of decoration could mask the underlying tension that permeated this floor. She knocked gently on the door before entering. The room was bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon sunlight, filtering through partially closed blinds. In the hospital bed lay Dylan Cooper, a small boy with dark brown hair and pale skin that made the dark circles under his eyes more pronounced. Various monitors surrounded him, their screens displaying heart rhythms and oxygen levels that Jennifer's trained eye immediately assessed. Sitting in a chair pulled close to the bed was Rachel Cooper. She was thin, perhaps too thin, with blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her clothes looked worn, a faded t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and worry, and her blue eyes were red-rimmed from crying. She looked up as Jennifer entered, attempting a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi there," Jennifer said softly, approaching the bed with a warm smile directed at Dylan. "I'm Jennifer, and I'm going to be one of your nurses. What's your name?" Dylan looked at her with big brown eyes that held a mix of fear and curiosity. "Dylan," he whispered, his voice small and uncertain. "That's a great name. You know, I had a friend in high school named Dylan, and he was the funniest person I ever met. Do you like jokes, Dylan?" The boy nodded slightly, and Jennifer noticed the small spark of interest in his eyes. She spent the next few minutes checking his vitals, all while engaging him in gentle conversation about his favorite subjects at school, his love of dinosaurs, and his dream of becoming a paleontologist. Throughout the interaction, she was acutely aware of Rachel watching her every move, the mother's anxiety palpable in the room. After ensuring Dylan was comfortable and his monitors were properly adjusted, Jennifer turned to Rachel. "Mrs. Cooper, could we talk outside for just a moment?" Rachel hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave her son's side. But Jennifer's kind expression reassured her. "I'll just be right outside, baby," she told Dylan, kissing his forehead before following Jennifer into the hallway. Once the door closed behind them, Rachel's composure crumbled slightly. She leaned against the wall, her hands trembling as she wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she said, her voice breaking. "The doctor told me he needs surgery within the next 2 weeks, maybe sooner. I have $3,147 in my savings account. That's everything I've managed to save in 5 years. I've already called every charity, every foundation I could find online. Most of them have waiting lists that are months or years long, and Dylan doesn't have that kind of time." Jennifer had heard similar stories more times than she could count, and each one still hit her like a physical blow. She reached out and gently touched Rachel's arm. "I know this seems impossible right now, but Dr. Anderson is one of the best pediatric cardiac surgeons in Texas. We're going to figure this out." "How?" Rachel asked, tears streaming down her face. "I've already mortgaged everything I own, which isn't much. My car is 15 years old and barely runs. I live in a one-bedroom apartment that costs half my monthly income. I work 70 hours a week just to keep us fed and housed. Where am I supposed to find $180,000? Jennifer didn't have an answer. She had seen families go into crushing debt, declare bankruptcy, or worse, watch their children deteriorate because they couldn't afford treatment. The American healthcare system was a labyrinth of insurance policies, deductibles, and coverage gaps that often left the most vulnerable people stranded. "Let me talk to our financial counselor," Jennifer said. "Sometimes there are programs or grants that can help. Don't give up hope yet." Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Hope doesn't pay for heart surgery, Miss Hayes, but thank you for being kind. That's more than some people have been." As Jennifer returned to the nurse's station, her mind was already racing through possibilities. She had been involved in helping families navigate financial assistance before, but cases this severe and urgent were always the most challenging. She sat down at the computer and began documenting Dylan's admission information, but her thoughts kept drifting to the small boy in room 412 and his desperate mother. Patricia appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Jennifer. "You've got that look," she said knowingly. "What look?" "The look that says you're going to move heaven and earth to help this family." Jennifer took a sip of the coffee, grimacing slightly at its bitterness. "Someone has to. That little boy deserves a chance at a normal life." "They all do," Patricia said quietly. "But we can't save everyone, Jennifer. You know that." "Maybe not," Jennifer replied, "but we have to try." The next several days blurred together in a routine of monitoring Dylan's condition, which remained stable but precarious. Jennifer found herself spending extra time in his room, reading him stories about dinosaurs and teaching him simple card games to keep his spirits up. Rachel rarely left, except to shower at home or grab a quick meal from the cafeteria, surviving on coffee and determination. Jennifer contacted the hospital's financial assistance office, filling out extensive paperwork on Rachel's behalf. She reached out to the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation, the charity established by country music legend George Strait after the tragic death of his daughter in a car accident in 1986. The foundation was known for supporting children's charities in Texas, but their response was that they typically funded organizational grants rather than individual cases. By the fourth day, Dr. Anderson had scheduled Dylan's surgery for the following week, despite the financial situation remaining unresolved. "We can't wait any longer," he told Jennifer privately. "His condition is deteriorating. We'll figure out the billing later. But this child needs surgery now." Jennifer was in the break room on Thursday evening, exhausted from a particularly long shift, when Patricia found her. The older nurse's face held an expression Jennifer had never seen before, something between shock and wonder. "Jennifer, you need to come to the administrative office. Right now." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Just come." They walked quickly through the hospital corridors to the administrative wing, a section of the building Jennifer rarely visited. They were led into the office of Linda Martinez, the hospital's chief financial officer. Linda was a woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair cut in a professional bob and sharp brown eyes that usually assessed everything with business-like efficiency. But today, those eyes looked softer, almost emotional. "Nurse Hayes," Linda said, gesturing for Jennifer to sit. "I wanted you to be among the first to know since you've been so involved with the Cooper family. We received notification this afternoon that Dylan Cooper's entire surgical cost, including all preoperative and postoperative care, has been covered by an anonymous donation." Jennifer stared at her, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry." "What?" "The full amount, $182,000, has been deposited into a medical fund specifically designated for Dylan's care. The donation came through a private foundation we've worked with before, but the actual donor's identity is protected by multiple layers of legal privacy." "Who would do that?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda shook her head. "We don't know. The foundation that processed the donation is called Heartstrings Foundation. They've paid for several children's surgeries over the years, always anonymously. We have no idea who funds them." Patricia, standing behind Jennifer, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Someone out there is an angel." Jennifer's mind reeled. In 12 years of nursing, she had never witnessed anything like this. Anonymous donations of this magnitude simply didn't happen. Or if they did, they were rare enough to be newsworthy. "Does Rachel know?" Jennifer asked. "Not yet. I wanted to inform you first since you've been coordinating her case. Would you like to tell her?" Jennifer nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. 10 minutes later, Jennifer stood outside room 412, composing herself before entering. When she walked in, Rachel was sitting in her usual chair beside Dylan's bed, holding her son's hand while he slept. The evening light cast a gentle glow across the room, and for a moment, Jennifer just stood there, watching this mother's vigil. Rachel looked up, immediately alert to any change in her son's condition. "Is everything okay?" Jennifer closed the door behind her and approached the bed. "Mrs. Cooper, I need to tell you something." Rachel's face went pale. "Is it Dylan? Has his condition worsened?" No, Jennifer said quickly, pulling up a chair so she could sit face to face with the frightened mother. "Dylan is stable. This is about something else entirely. The hospital received an anonymous donation today that covers the entire cost of Dylan's surgery and all related care." Rachel stared at her blankly. as if the words were in a foreign language. What? Someone donated $182,000 to pay for Dylan's surgery. Everything is covered. The surgery is scheduled for Monday morning, and you don't have to worry about the cost. For a long moment, Rachel didn't move. Then, slowly, tears began to stream down her face. Not the desperate, frightened tears Jennifer had seen before, but tears of relief so profound that Rachel's entire body seemed to release years of tension all at once. "I don't understand," Rachel whispered. "Who would do this? Why?" "We don't know. The donation was made anonymously through a foundation, but someone out there wanted to help Dylan." Rachel covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Jennifer moved closer, placing an arm around the shaking woman's shoulders. They sat like that for several minutes, Rachel crying tears of relief and disbelief while her son slept peacefully, unaware that his life had just been saved by a stranger's extraordinary generosity. When Rachel finally composed herself enough to speak, she looked at Jennifer with red, swollen eyes. "How do I thank someone I don't know? How do I ever repay this?" "You don't have to repay it," Jennifer said gently. "Someone gave this gift because they wanted Dylan to live, to have a chance at a healthy life. The best way to honor that is to let Dylan grow up and be happy." That night, as Jennifer drove home through the quiet streets of San Antonio, she couldn't stop thinking about the anonymous donation. Who had that kind of money to give away? More importantly, who had the heart to give it without recognition or acknowledgement? She pulled into the driveway of her small house in the Alamo Heights neighborhood, a modest two-bedroom home she had purchased 3 years earlier. Inside, her golden retriever, Charlie, greeted her with enthusiastic tail wags and demands for attention. She fed him, made herself a simple dinner of pasta and salad, and sat down at her kitchen table with her laptop. Curiosity drove her to search for information about Heartstrings Foundation. The search results were minimal, a basic website with vague language about supporting children's medical care in Texas. But no names, no board members listed, no physical address beyond a P.O. box in Austin. The privacy was remarkable and deliberate. She expanded her search, looking for other children who might have received similar help. Over the next hour, she found scattered mentions in local news articles and hospital records she had access to through her work system. Over the past 5 years, at least a dozen children in Texas had received anonymous funding for expensive medical procedures, all processed through Heartstrings Foundation. The pattern was clear but mysterious. Someone was quietly saving children's lives, one at a time, without seeking any credit or publicity. In an age where philanthropy was often accompanied by press releases and photo opportunities, this level of anonymity was almost unheard of. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Did you tell her? How did she react?" "Tears of joy," Jennifer typed back. "Still can't believe it. Whoever this mystery donor is, they're doing God's work." As Jennifer prepared for bed that night, she couldn't shake a feeling that this was only the beginning of something larger. She had always believed in the goodness of people, but this level of generosity challenged even her optimistic view of humanity. Dylan's surgery was scheduled for Monday morning, August 19, 2019. Dr. Anderson would perform the complex procedure to repair the defects in Dylan's heart. The success rate was high, but any heart surgery carried risks, especially in someone so young. Jennifer wasn't scheduled to work Monday, but she came in anyway, arriving at the hospital at 5 in the morning. She found Rachel in the surgical waiting room, looking small and alone in the large space filled with rows of chairs. Jennifer sat beside her, and they waited together as the hours passed. The surgery took 6 hours. Dr. Anderson emerged from the operating room just after 2 in the afternoon, still in his surgical scrubs, his face showing the exhaustion of intense concentration. but also a smile that told them everything they needed to know before he spoke. The surgery was a complete success, he said, and Rachel collapsed against Jennifer, sobbing with relief. Dylan's heart is functioning properly now. He'll need careful monitoring and follow-up care, but he should be able to live a normal, healthy life. Recovery was slow but steady. Dylan spent 4 days in the pediatric intensive care unit before being moved back to a regular room. Jennifer visited him every day, even on her days off, watching his color improve and his energy gradually return. The transformation was remarkable. The pale, frightened boy was replaced by a child with rosy cheeks and a ready smile. 2 weeks after the surgery, Dylan was discharged from the hospital. Jennifer was there for his departure, helping Rachel pack up the room that had been their home for nearly 3 weeks. Dylan, dressed in regular clothes for the first time since his admission, looked like any other 7-year-old boy, excited to go home and sleep in his own bed. Before they left, Rachel pulled Jennifer aside in the hallway. "I know I've said thank you 100 times, but I need to say it again. You didn't just take care of my son medically. You cared about us as people. That made all the difference." "That's my job," Jennifer said, though they both knew it was more than that. "And whoever paid for this," Rachel continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I wish I could tell them what this means. They gave me my son's life. How do you thank someone for that?" Jennifer hugged her. "Maybe someday we'll find out who they are. Until then, just watch Dylan grow up healthy and happy. That's the thank you they would want." As Jennifer watched Rachel and Dylan walk toward the elevators, Dylan's hand clasped firmly in his mother's. She felt a familiar warmth in her chest, the feeling that reminded her why she had chosen this profession despite its heartbreaks and challenges. But the question remained, haunting her thoughts as she returned to her duties. Who was behind Heartstrings Foundation? Who had the resources and the heart to save lives in silence? She didn't know it yet, but that question would lead her on a journey that would reveal one of the most beautiful secrets in Texas. A secret that had been kept for over 30 years, born from tragedy and transformed into hope for countless families. The answer was closer than she imagined, hidden in plain sight in the heart of Texas, connected to a name known to millions, but whose quiet generosity was known to almost no one. That evening, as Jennifer prepared to leave the hospital after her shift, she stopped by the nurse's station where Patricia was reviewing patient charts. "Patricia, can I ask you something?" The older nurse looked up. "Of course, honey. In your 28 years here, how many times have you seen anonymous donations like Dylan's?" Patricia set down her pen and removed her reading glasses, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "You know, now that you mention it, I've seen it happen about 6 or 7 times over the years. Always through that same foundation, always children needing cardiac surgery or other major procedures. I never really thought about it as a pattern before. Doesn't it seem strange? Someone has donated probably over $1 million, maybe more, and nobody knows who it is?" "Strange isn't the word I'd use," Patricia said. "Rare, maybe. Special, definitely. But Jennifer, maybe some people just want to help without recognition. Maybe that's the purest form of charity." Jennifer nodded, but she couldn't let it go. Something about this mystery felt important, not just out of curiosity, but because she felt these families deserved to know who their guardian angel was. Over the following weeks, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about the pattern of donations. During her lunch breaks, she began compiling information, creating a spreadsheet of every case she could find where Heartstrings Foundation had intervened. She requested old records from the hospital's financial department, claiming she was researching philanthropic trends for a potential presentation. What she discovered was astonishing. Over the past 15 years, Heartstrings Foundation had paid for the medical care of 43 children across Texas. The donations totaled over $5 million. Every single case involved children from low-income families facing life-threatening conditions that required expensive interventions. But the trail always ended at the same dead end: a P.O. box in Austin and a website with no real information. Whoever was behind this had gone to extraordinary lengths to remain anonymous. Jennifer's investigation might have ended there, if not for a chance conversation in late September. She was having coffee with her college roommate, Amanda Peterson, who now worked as a grant writer for various nonprofit organizations in Austin. "I'm telling you, Amanda, it's the strangest thing," Jennifer said, stirring cream into her coffee at a small cafe in downtown San Antonio. Millions of dollars, dozens of kids saved, and absolutely no information about the donor. Amanda, a petite woman with short black hair and sharp features, leaned forward with interest. "What did you say the foundation was called?" "Heartstrings Foundation. Based in Austin. But that's all I know." Amanda pulled out her phone and began typing. "I work with hundreds of foundations and nonprofits. Let me see if I've heard of them." She scrolled through her contacts and databases for several minutes, while Jennifer watched hopefully. Finally, Amanda looked up. "I can't find them in any of the usual registries, which is weird. But wait, I have a friend who works at the Texas Secretary of State's office. They handle nonprofit registrations. Let me text her." 20 minutes later, Amanda's phone buzzed with a response. She read it, her eyebrows rising. "Okay, so Heartstrings Foundation is registered as a private family foundation, which means they're not required to disclose as much information as public charities. But here's the interesting part. The foundation's legal representative is a law firm in San Antonio, Kaufman and Associates." Jennifer's heart rate quickened. "That's something. That's more than I had before." "Don't get too excited," Amanda warned. "These lawyers probably won't tell you anything. Attorney-client privilege and all that. But at least it's a lead." That evening, Jennifer lay in bed. Charlie curled up at her feet and considered her next move. She could let this go, except that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. Or she could follow this one lead, knowing it might lead nowhere. The faces of the children she had seen saved by anonymous generosity flashed through her mind. Dylan Cooper, smiling as he left the hospital. A teenage girl named Emma, who had received a liver transplant 3 years ago. A 5-year-old boy named Nathan, who had battled pediatric cancer. These families deserved to know who had saved their children. They deserved the chance to say thank you. Jennifer made her decision. Tomorrow, she would contact Kaufman and Associates. She would find out who was behind Heartstrings Foundation. She had no idea that her search would lead her to one of country music's most legendary figures, a man whose personal tragedy had been transformed into a mission of silent compassion that had touched hundreds of lives. The truth was out there, carefully guarded, but not impossible to uncover. And Jennifer Hayes, a pediatric nurse with a stubborn streak and a belief in the power of gratitude, was about to uncover a secret that would change her life and inspire a nation. The law offices of Kaufman and Associates occupied the 5th floor of a modern glass building in downtown San Antonio, near the River Walk. Jennifer stood outside the entrance on a crisp October morning, her hands slightly trembling as she clutched a folder containing all her research on Heartstrings Foundation. She had taken a personal day from the hospital, telling herself that this was important enough to justify the time off. The lobby was all polished marble and leather furniture, with abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Jennifer's annual salary. A receptionist with perfectly styled hair and a professional smile greeted her from behind a curved desk. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with someone about Heartstrings Foundation," Jennifer said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I'm a nurse at Texas Children's Hospital, and I'm trying to find information about the foundation's donors." The receptionist's smile remained fixed, but something shifted in her eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. I was hoping someone might have a few minutes to speak with me. It's regarding medical donations the foundation has made." "One moment, please." The receptionist picked up her phone and had a brief, quiet conversation that Jennifer couldn't quite hear. After a minute, she hung up and said, "Someone will be with you shortly. Please have a seat." Jennifer sat in one of the leather chairs, her knee bouncing nervously. She flipped through a magazine without really seeing the pages, her mind rehearsing what she would say. She wasn't trying to violate anyone's privacy. She just wanted to understand who was helping these families and why. After 15 minutes, a man emerged from a hallway. He was in his early 60s, with gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a well-tailored navy suit. He approached Jennifer with an extended hand. "Miss Hayes, I'm Robert Kaufman. Please come to my office." Jennifer followed him down a corridor lined with oil paintings of Texas landscapes. His office was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of downtown San Antonio. Bookshelves filled with legal volumes lined one wall, and his desk was remarkably organized. Kaufman gestured for her to sit in a chair across from his desk before settling into his own chair. He folded his hands on the desk and regarded her with a neutral expression that Jennifer imagined he had perfected over decades of legal practice. "My receptionist mentioned you're inquiring about Heartstrings Foundation," he said. "May I ask what your interest is?" Jennifer opened her folder and pulled out several documents. "I'm a pediatric nurse, and over the past few months, I've become aware that this foundation has paid for numerous children's medical procedures. I've compiled a list of at least 43 cases over the past 15 years, totaling over $5 million in donations." Kaufman's expression didn't change, but Jennifer noticed the slightest tightening around his eyes. "That's very thorough research, Miss Hayes. I'm not trying to cause problems or violate anyone's privacy," Jennifer continued quickly. "I just believe these families deserve to know who their benefactor is. These aren't small gifts. These are life-saving interventions. Parents want to express their gratitude, to say thank you to the person who saved their child's life." Kaufman was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Miss Hayes, I appreciate your intentions, and I understand why you're here. But I'm sure you can imagine that someone who donates this generously while maintaining complete anonymity has specific reasons for doing so. My firm represents Heartstrings Foundation, and we are legally bound to protect the privacy of the foundation's benefactor." "Can you at least tell me why they want to remain anonymous?" Jennifer asked. "Is it for tax purposes? Privacy? Do they not want to be overwhelmed by requests?" A slight smile tugged at Kaufman's lips. "I can't discuss the motivations of my client. However, I can tell you, speaking generally, that some people believe the purest form of charity is that which expects nothing in return. Not recognition, not gratitude, not even acknowledgement. There's an old Jewish concept called Maimonides, 8 levels of charity. The highest level is giving in such a way that neither the giver nor the receiver knows the other's identity. That's beautiful in theory, Jennifer said. But these are real people whose lives have been changed. Rachel Cooper, the mother of a boy whose surgery was recently paid for by your foundation, she cries every night wishing she could thank whoever saved her son. Is it really fair to deny her that? Kaufman's expression softened slightly. I understand your point, Miss Hayes, but my hands are tied. I cannot and will not reveal my client's identity. Jennifer felt frustration building in her chest. She had come so far, and this was another dead end. Can you at least pass along a message? Let your client know that these families are grateful, that their generosity has changed lives in ways they might not even understand? I can do that, Kaufman said, his tone gentler now. And between you and me, off the record, I can tell you that my client is very much aware of the impact their donations have had. That's why they continue to do it. Jennifer stood to leave, disappointed, but not entirely defeated. As she reached the door, she turned back. Mr. Kaufman, one more question. Does the foundation have any connection to the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation? Kaufman's poker face slipped for just a fraction of a second. A barely perceptible widening of his eyes that confirmed Jennifer's suspicion even before he spoke. I'm afraid I can't comment on that, Miss Hayes. But that momentary reaction told Jennifer everything she needed to know. There was a connection to George Strait's foundation, even if Kaufman wouldn't admit it. As Jennifer left the building and walked back to her car, her mind raced. George Strait was one of the most famous country music singers in the world, known as the King of Country. He had been performing for over 4 decades with countless hit songs and sold-out concerts. But he was also known for being intensely private about his personal life. Jennifer knew the basic story that most people knew. George and his wife Norma had lost their 13-year-old daughter, Jennifer, in a car accident in 1986. The tragedy had devastated the family, and George had channeled his grief into supporting children's charities through the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation. But that foundation was public knowledge, well documented and openly discussed. Heartstrings Foundation was something else entirely. A secret operation that had been running for over a decade, saving children's lives in complete anonymity. Could George Strait really be behind it? The timeline made sense. He certainly had the financial resources, but why keep it secret when he already had a public foundation? Jennifer spent the next several days diving deeper into research. She scoured the internet for any connection between George Strait and the children who had received help from Heartstrings Foundation. She looked for patterns in timing. Did donations coincide with his concert tours or album releases? She discovered that George Strait still lived on a ranch near San Antonio when he wasn't touring. He had been performing regularly in Las Vegas, but always returned to Texas, his home state. His deep connection to Texas was well documented, and Heartstrings Foundation only helped children in Texas. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, Jennifer sat in her living room with her laptop, Charlie's head resting on her lap, when she noticed something interesting. Several of the children helped by Heartstrings Foundation had been featured in local news stories, not about their anonymous donations, but about their recoveries and accomplishments after their surgeries. One of those stories, from 3 years ago, mentioned that a teenage girl named Emma Richardson had met George Strait at a meet-and-greet event at a hospital fundraiser. Jennifer found Emma's Facebook page and sent her a message. "Hi, Emma. My name is Jennifer Hayes, and I'm a nurse at Texas Children's Hospital. I'm doing research on charitable foundations that help children with medical needs, and I came across your story about your liver transplant 3 years ago. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk to me about your experience. Nothing you say will be made public. I'm just trying to understand how these foundations work." To her surprise, Emma responded within an hour. She was now 18, a freshman at the University of Texas at Austin, studying pre-med. They agreed to meet for coffee the following Tuesday. Emma was a striking young woman with long dark hair and bright eyes that held a wisdom beyond her years. They met at a Starbucks near the UT campus, and Emma ordered a caramel macchiato while Jennifer stuck with black coffee. "Thanks for meeting with me," Jennifer said as they settled into a corner table. "I know this might seem like a strange request." "It's okay," Emma said with a warm smile. "My story's not a secret. I almost died when I was 15 from liver failure. I needed a transplant, and my family had good insurance that covered most of it. But there were still tens of thousands in out-of-pocket costs that my parents couldn't afford. Then, out of nowhere, someone paid for everything. They called it Heartstrings Foundation. Did you ever find out who paid for it? Emma shook her head. Never. My parents tried everything. They hired a private investigator, talked to lawyers, called the foundation, but it was all dead ends. Eventually, we just accepted it as a miracle and moved on with our lives. You mentioned you met George Strait at a hospital fundraiser. Can you tell me about that? Emma's face lit up. Oh, that was amazing. It was about 6 months after my transplant. The hospital was having this big fundraiser, and George Strait was the special guest. My parents got tickets, and we went. During the event, someone from his team approached us and said Mr. Strait wanted to meet me specifically. I couldn't believe it. What did he say to you? He was incredibly kind. He asked about my health, about my recovery, about what I wanted to do with my life. I told him I wanted to become a doctor to help other kids like me. He seemed really moved by that. Then he said something I've never forgotten. Emma paused, her eyes becoming distant with the memory. He said, "Sometimes God puts us through the hardest things so we can help others through their hard things. You're going to do amazing work, Emma. I'm proud of you." It was like he really knew me, you know? Not just from that 5-minute conversation, but like he really understood what I'd been through. Jennifer's heart was beating faster. Did he say anything about your surgery? Or the foundation that helped you? No, not directly. But there was this moment. My mom was crying, and she said, "Mr. Strait, if it weren't for the kindness of strangers, Emma wouldn't be here today." And he got this look in his eyes, this deep sadness mixed with something else. He just said, "The best thing any of us can do is help each other, especially our children." Then he gave me a hug and moved on to meet other people. Emma, do you think George Strait was the one who paid for your surgery? Emma was quiet for a long moment, stirring her drink thoughtfully. You know, I've wondered that for 3 years. The way he looked at me, the things he said, the fact that someone specifically brought him to meet me at that event, it all felt too personal to be random. But I have no proof. And even if he did do it, he clearly doesn't want recognition. So I've just kept my suspicions to myself. They talked for another hour, with Emma sharing more details about her recovery and her experiences since the transplant. Before they parted, Emma said something that stayed with Jennifer. "Whatever you find out, please don't do anything that would hurt him or betray his trust. If George Strait is saving children's lives in secret, that's his choice to make. Some heroes don't wear capes. Some just quietly do the right thing and go home." That night, Jennifer couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Emma's words and about the look in Robert Kaufman's eyes when she mentioned the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation. All the pieces were there, forming a picture that seemed increasingly clear. But Emma was right. If George Strait wanted his generosity to remain private, what right did Jennifer have to expose it? Yet at the same time, she kept thinking about Rachel Cooper and all the other families who wanted so desperately to express their gratitude. Over the next week, Jennifer continued her investigation more carefully. She discovered that several other children who had been helped by Heartstrings Foundation had also met George Strait at various charity events over the years. The connections were subtle enough that no one had apparently put the pieces together before. But once Jennifer started looking, the pattern was unmistakable. She found a blog post from a father whose daughter had received a heart transplant 5 years ago. He wrote, "We attended the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation fundraiser tonight. George Strait personally thanked us for coming and spent 10 minutes talking to Ashley about her transplant. He seemed to know details about her case that we'd never publicly shared. My wife and I looked at each other thinking the same thing. Could he be our angel? but we didn't ask. Some questions are better left unasked. Jennifer created a timeline on her wall at home, using sticky notes and string like a detective in a crime show. Every child helped by Heartstrings Foundation. Every public appearance by George Strait that coincided with meetings with those children or their families. The pattern was undeniable, but she still needed confirmation. She needed someone who knew for certain. That someone turned out to be closer than she expected. In early November, Jennifer was working a shift in the pediatric cardiac unit when she struck up a conversation with a new physical therapist named Kevin Russell. Kevin was in his late 50s, with graying hair and a friendly demeanor. During a break, they chatted about their backgrounds, and Kevin mentioned that he had previously worked at a rehabilitation center in Nashville. Nashville! That must have been interesting, with all the country music stars around, Jennifer said casually. Oh yeah, we had a few famous clients over the years. Most of them were pretty down to earth, actually. The biggest stars were often the nicest people. Ever work with George Strait? Jennifer asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Kevin's face lit up. Actually, yes. Not him personally, but his family. This was years ago, back in the 90s. I worked with patients recovering from various injuries. Great family, very private, but incredibly kind. Jennifer's pulse quickened. I'm a huge fan of his music. He seems like a genuinely good person. He is, Kevin said emphatically. And you know what's amazing? After what they went through with their daughter, instead of becoming bitter, they've dedicated themselves to helping others. I mean, everyone knows about their public foundation, but he trailed off, seeming to catch himself. But what? Jennifer pressed gently. Kevin hesitated, then lowered his voice. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, and I have no proof, just things I overheard and pieced together back then. But I believe George and Norma Strait have been quietly paying for children's medical care for decades. Not through their public foundation, but personally, anonymously. I overheard a conversation once between George and someone else about wanting to help kids, but not wanting it to become a media circus. He wanted to help because it was the right thing to do, not for publicity. Did he ever say why he wanted it to be anonymous? Kevin nodded. From what I understood, after they lost Jennifer, they were overwhelmed by the media attention and public sympathy. George is an intensely private person, and he felt like his family's grief was being turned into a spectacle. He wanted to help other families avoid the tragedy they'd experienced, but he wanted to do it quietly, person to person, without cameras or reporters. Just genuine help with no strings attached. Jennifer felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Everything was coming together. Thank you for sharing that, Kevin. Why do you ask? Kevin looked at her curiously. Jennifer decided to be honest. I've been trying to figure out who's behind a foundation called Heartstrings that's been paying for children's surgeries. I think it might be George Strait, but I don't have proof. Kevin's expression turned serious. If it is him, and I suspect you're right, please be careful what you do with that information. Some people's generosity is rooted in pain, and exposing it against their wishes could cause more harm than good. I know, Jennifer said quietly. I'm still figuring out what the right thing to do is. That evening, Jennifer sat at her kitchen table staring at her wall of research. She had enough evidence to be virtually certain that George Strait was the anonymous donor behind Heartstrings Foundation. But what should she do with that information? She thought about Rachel Cooper, who would be overwhelmed to know that one of country music's biggest legends had saved her son's life. She thought about all the other families who had been helped over the years, who went to bed each night grateful to someone they would never know. She also thought about George Strait, a man who had suffered an unimaginable loss and had transformed that pain into decades of quiet service. A man who could have easily become bitter or withdrawn, but instead chose to save children's lives, expecting nothing in return. Jennifer pulled out her phone and sent a text to Amanda. "I think I know who it is." Amanda called immediately. "Who?" "George Strait." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Amanda said, "Oh my God, that actually makes perfect sense. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Jennifer admitted. "Part of me wants to tell every family he's helped, to give them the chance to thank him. But another part of me thinks that would be betraying exactly what makes his generosity so special." "This is bigger than you realize," Amanda said slowly. "If you reveal this, it becomes a national story. George Strait's anonymous charity would be front-page news. He'd probably have to stop doing it, because he'd be inundated with requests. You could actually harm the very program that's saving lives." Jennifer hadn't thought of that. Amanda was right. Exposing George Strait's secret generosity could actually end it. The media attention would make it impossible for him to continue helping families anonymously. "But don't these families deserve to know?" Jennifer asked. "Maybe," Amanda said. "Or maybe they already have what matters most. Their children are alive and healthy. Does it really matter if they know the name of the person who made that possible?" Jennifer didn't have an answer. Over the next several weeks, as the holidays approached, Jennifer wrestled with her dilemma. She visited Dylan Cooper and his mother, watching the boy play with other children in their apartment complex, full of energy and life. Rachel had gotten a better-paying job at a local restaurant and was talking about going back to school to get her GED. "He's doing so well," Rachel told Jennifer during one visit. "His cardiologist says he's healing beautifully. He'll need monitoring as he grows, but he should be able to live a completely normal life. It's like a miracle." "It is a miracle," Jennifer agreed. "I still think about whoever paid for his surgery," Rachel said wistfully. "I wish I could tell them what it means to me. I wish they could see Dylan running and playing and being a regular kid. I wish they knew they didn't just save his life. They saved mine too. I don't know how I would have survived losing him." Jennifer squeezed Rachel's hand. "Wherever they are, I think they know. I think that's exactly what they hoped for." As Christmas approached, Jennifer made a decision. She would write a letter, not to George Strait directly, which might be too presumptuous if she was wrong, but to Robert Kaufman, who could pass it along to the donor behind Heartstrings Foundation, whoever that might be. She spent hours crafting the letter, wanting to express the gratitude of all the families without revealing what she knew or suspected. The final version was simple and heartfelt. "Dear friend, I am writing on behalf of the many families whose lives you have changed through your generosity. I am a pediatric nurse at Texas Children's Hospital, and I have had the privilege of caring for several children whose medical care was funded by Heartstrings Foundation. I want you to know that your gifts have done more than pay for surgeries. You have given parents hope when they had none. You have given children futures that were being stolen by circumstances beyond their control. You have shown these families that there is still profound goodness in the world. The children you have helped are thriving. They are running and playing and dreaming about their futures. Their parents are able to sleep at night without the crushing weight of impossible debt. All of this because of your kindness. I respect your desire for privacy and anonymity. I will not attempt to discover your identity or share my suspicions with anyone. But I wanted you to know, from someone who has seen the impact of your generosity firsthand, that you are making a real, lasting difference. You are saving lives and healing hearts, both literally and figuratively. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of all the families who don't know who to thank." With deepest gratitude, Jennifer Hayes, RNN. She mailed the letter to Kaufman and Associates, addressed to Robert Kaufman with instructions to forward it to his client. 3 weeks later, in mid-January 2020, Jennifer received a response. It came in a plain envelope with no return address, postmarked from Austin. Inside was a single page with a handwritten note. "Dear Miss Hayes, your letter touched my heart more than you can know. The work we do through Heartstrings Foundation is personal and private, but it brings us joy to know that the children we help are thriving. You asked the right questions and showed discretion where many would not. For that, I am grateful. Please know that your dedication to your young patients has not gone unnoticed. You are making a difference every day through your compassion and care. The families we help don't need to know our name. They just need to know that someone cared enough to help when they needed it most. That's enough for us. Keep doing the important work you're doing. The world needs more people like you. With appreciation, a friend." Jennifer read and reread the letter a dozen times. The handwriting was distinctive, written with an elegant fountain pen in blue ink. There was no signature beyond "a friend," no clue to definitively confirm the writer's identity. But somehow, Jennifer knew. The tone, the humility, the focus on the children rather than the donor. It all fit with everything she had learned about George Strait. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Her investigation was over. She had found her answer, or as close to one as she would ever get, and she would keep that answer to herself. The secret of Heartstrings Foundation would remain safe, or so she thought. The COVID-19 pandemic hit Texas hard in March 2020, transforming Jennifer's daily life at Texas Children's Hospital into a series of unprecedented challenges. The pediatric unit wasn't overwhelmed with COVID cases the way adult hospitals were, but the ripple effects touched everything. Staffing shortages, new protocols, the constant worry of exposure. Jennifer adapted like everyone else, masking up, socially distancing, video calling with friends instead of meeting in person. Charlie became her primary companion during the long months of isolation, and her work at the hospital became even more meaningful as a source of purpose during uncertain times. Throughout 2020 and into 2021, Heartstrings Foundation continued its quiet work. Jennifer noticed 3 more children receive anonymous funding for critical procedures during that time. The pandemic had created additional financial hardship for many families, making the mysterious foundation's interventions even more crucial. By the spring of 2022, as the world slowly emerged from the worst of the pandemic, Jennifer had largely moved on from her investigation into Heartstrings Foundation. She had her suspicions, she had her letter, and she had made peace with leaving the mystery unsolved in any official capacity. Then, on a bright Tuesday morning in May 2022, everything changed. Jennifer was having breakfast before her shift, scrolling through her phone while eating toast, when she saw a headline on a local news website that made her freeze. Local journalist investigates anonymous donor saving children's lives. Trail leads to country music legend. Her hands trembling, Jennifer clicked on the article. It was written by Marcus Caldwell, an investigative journalist for the San Antonio Express News. The article laid out many of the same connections Jennifer had discovered. The pattern of anonymous donations, the meetings between George Strait and families of children who had received help, the suspicious silence from Kaufman and Associates. Caldwell had done his homework. The article included interviews with several families, quotes from medical professionals, and a detailed timeline that all pointed toward one conclusion. George Strait had been anonymously donating millions of dollars to pay for children's medical care for over 2 decades. At the end of the article, Caldwell had written, Attempts to reach George Strait's representatives for comment were unsuccessful. Neither Mr. Strait nor his publicist responded to multiple requests for interviews. However, sources close to the singer confirm that he has been deeply involved in charitable work beyond his public foundation for many years. Jennifer felt sick. This was exactly what she had feared might happen. The story was compelling, the evidence was strong, and now it was public knowledge. Within hours, the article had been picked up by national news outlets. By that evening, George Strait was trending on Twitter. The response was immediate and divided. Many people were inspired by the story, calling George Strait a hero and praising his selfless generosity. Country music fans shared the article widely, expressing pride in their favorite artist. Celebrities and public figures tweeted their admiration. But there was another side to the reaction. Within days, George Strait's representatives were reportedly being inundated with requests for help. Families from across the country began reaching out, sharing their own medical hardships, asking if George Strait could help them too. The attention that he had apparently spent decades trying to avoid had found him anyway. Jennifer watched the story unfold with a growing sense of guilt, even though she hadn't been the one to break it. She kept thinking about her investigation, wondering if somehow her inquiries had tipped off Caldwell or provided him with leads. Had her letter to Kaufman somehow leaked? Had her conversations with Emma or Kevin Russell been overheard? A week after Caldwell's article was published, George Strait's publicist released a brief statement. Mr. Strait appreciates the kind words people have expressed regarding recent news reports. He has always believed that helping others, especially children, is simply the right thing to do. He asks that people respect his family's privacy during this time. The statement was careful, neither confirming nor denying the specific claims about Heartstrings Foundation. But to most people, the lack of denial was confirmation enough. Jennifer was working a night shift 2 weeks after the story broke when she received a call to come to the nurses' station. When she arrived, Patricia looked troubled. "Jennifer, there's someone here to see you." "A lawyer?" Jennifer's stomach dropped. "A lawyer? About what?" "He wouldn't say. He's waiting in the conference room." Jennifer's mind raced as she walked to the small conference room near the administrative offices. Had she somehow violated patient privacy during her investigation? Was she in legal trouble? The man waiting in the conference room was Robert Kaufman. He stood as she entered, his expression serious but not hostile. "Miss Hayes, thank you for meeting with me." "Mr. Kaufman, I don't understand. Why are you here?" "I'm here on behalf of my client," he said carefully, "the individual behind Heartstrings Foundation." Jennifer sat down heavily. "I didn't leak anything to that journalist. I kept my promise. I never told anyone what I suspected." Kaufman's expression softened slightly. "We know that, Miss Hayes. That's actually why I'm here. My client wanted me to meet with you personally to ensure you understood that they don't hold you responsible for what happened." "Then how did that journalist find out?" "Mr. Caldwell apparently started his investigation independently about a year ago, following a trail similar to the one you discovered. Unfortunately, he was less discreet in his inquiries, and he was motivated by journalistic ambition rather than gratitude or curiosity. By the time we became aware of his investigation, it was too late to stop the story." "I'm so sorry," Jennifer said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I know your client wanted to remain anonymous. This must be devastating." Kaufman sat back in his chair. "It's been challenging. The attention has been overwhelming. But I have a message for you from my client." He pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to Jennifer. "They wanted you to have this." With shaking hands, Jennifer opened the envelope. Inside was another handwritten letter. "Dear Jennifer, first, please don't blame yourself for what has happened. You conducted yourself with integrity and respect throughout your search for answers, and we are grateful for your discretion. The truth coming out was perhaps inevitable. In today's world, with so much information available at everyone's fingertips, true anonymity is increasingly difficult to maintain. We had a good run, over 20 years of being able to help families without the complications of publicity. While we regret the loss of privacy, we don't regret a single child we were able to help. Each surgery we funded, each family we supported, brought us joy and gave purpose to our pain. Our daughter's death left a hole in our hearts that will never fully heal. But helping other children has been a way to honor her memory and ensure that her short life still touches the world in meaningful ways. The attention has been difficult, and we will likely need to restructure how we help families going forward. But children will continue to need help, and we will continue to provide it in whatever way we can. Thank you for caring so deeply about your patients and their families. Thank you for wanting these families to know they were helped out of genuine compassion, not obligation. And thank you for respecting our wishes, even when you could have easily sought recognition for uncovering our secret. You're a good person, Jennifer Hayes. Keep being a light for the children in your care. With respect and gratitude, George and Norma Strait. Jennifer read the letter through tears. It was signed with both their names, confirming everything she had suspected. But more than that, it was a message of grace and understanding from people who had every right to be angry about their privacy being violated. "Can I write back?" Jennifer asked Kaufman. "Yes, you can send letters to my office, and I'll ensure they reach the Straits." After Kaufman left, Jennifer sat in the empty conference room for a long time, holding the letter. The secret was out now, for better or worse. The question was, what would happen next? Over the following months, the story of George Strait's anonymous generosity continued to capture public attention. News outlets ran follow-up pieces featuring families whose children had been saved by Heartstrings Foundation. Television programs invited George Strait for interviews, though he declined them all. The country music community rallied around him, with fellow artists praising his character and integrity. What surprised everyone, including Jennifer, was how the revelation ultimately inspired a wave of charitable giving across the country. Other wealthy individuals came forward to establish their own anonymous foundations supporting children's medical care. Hospitals reported increases in donations specifically designated for families facing overwhelming medical costs. Jennifer received messages from some of the families she had identified during her research. Rachel Cooper called her in tears after reading the news, overwhelmed by the knowledge that one of her musical heroes had saved Dylan's life. "I've been listening to his music since I was a teenager," Rachel said, her voice choked with emotion. "And all this time, he was the angel who saved my baby. How is that even possible?" "It's possible because he's a genuinely good person," Jennifer replied, "and because he understands the pain of losing a child and never wanted another family to experience that if he could prevent it." Emma Richardson, the young woman Jennifer had met in Austin, also reached out. "I knew it," Emma wrote in an email. "I've known in my heart for years. Thank you for respecting his privacy, even though you figured it out. Not many people would have done that." In July 2022, 3 months after the story broke, Jennifer received another call from Robert Kaufman. "Miss Hayes, my clients would like to meet you in person, if you're willing." Jennifer's heart nearly stopped. "George and Norma Strait want to meet me?" "Yes. They've been reading your letters, and they feel a connection to you. They'd like to thank you personally for your compassion and discretion. Would you be available for dinner next Saturday evening?" Jennifer could barely form words. Yes, of course." "Excellent. I'll send you the details. This will be a private meeting at their ranch. Please don't share this information with anyone." The week leading up to that Saturday was the longest of Jennifer's life. She told the hospital she needed a personal day, but didn't explain why. She told no one where she was going, not even Amanda or Patricia. On Saturday evening, Jennifer drove northwest from San Antonio into the Texas Hill Country. Kaufman's directions led her to a private road marked only by a discreet gate. She called a number she'd been given, and the gate opened automatically. The ranch was beautiful. Rolling hills, grazing cattle, and a large but unpretentious house that looked like it had been there for generations. As Jennifer parked her car, the front door opened and a woman stepped out. Norma Strait was in her early 70s, with silver hair and a warm smile that immediately put Jennifer at ease. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, looking nothing like the wife of a superstar and everything like a kind-hearted Texas grandmother. "Jennifer, I'm Norma. Please come in." The interior of the house was comfortable and lived in, with family photos on the walls, well-worn furniture, and the smell of home cooking in the air. Norma led Jennifer through to a cozy living room where George Strait was waiting. George Strait looked exactly like his photos. Tall, with gray hair beneath a cowboy hat he removed as he stood to greet her. But what struck Jennifer most was his eyes. They held a depth of sadness and kindness that photographs could never capture. "Miss Hayes," he said, extending his hand, "thank you for coming." "Mr. Strait, Mrs. Strait, the honor is entirely mine," Jennifer managed to say. "Please, call us George and Norma," Norma said, gesturing for Jennifer to sit. "We're not fancy people, despite what the news might suggest." They sat in the living room, and for a moment there was awkward silence. Then George spoke, his voice carrying that distinctive drawl that had made him famous. "We wanted to meet you because you did something remarkable. You figured out what we'd been doing, and instead of running to the press or trying to profit from that knowledge, you wrote us a letter thanking us. In a world where everyone seems to be chasing fame or money, you chose discretion and gratitude. I couldn't imagine exposing something so personal and beautiful," Jennifer said. "What you've been doing, it's the most extraordinary thing I've ever encountered." Norma leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "After we lost Jennifer, we were broken. For a long time, I didn't know if we'd survive that grief. George threw himself into music, and I threw myself into trying to help other families through the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation. But it wasn't enough. We needed to do something more personal, more direct." George continued, "We started Heartstrings Foundation about 23 years ago. The first child we helped was a little girl in Dallas who needed heart surgery. Her family was facing bankruptcy trying to pay for it. When we paid for that surgery anonymously and heard that she survived and thrived, it gave us purpose. It made Jennifer's death feel a little less meaningless." "How many children have you helped?" Jennifer asked softly. 67, Norma said immediately. "We know every single one of their names, their stories, their outcomes. We have a room upstairs where we keep letters and photos from families, even though they don't know who they're thanking. Would you like to see it?" George asked. Jennifer nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They led her upstairs to a bedroom that had been converted into a private memorial. The walls were covered with photos of children, smiling faces of every age, race, and background. There were letters pinned to corkboards, drawings made by young artists, and progress reports from doctors. In the center of the room was a framed photo of a beautiful teenage girl with long brown hair and a bright smile. Jennifer Strait. "This is how we remember our daughter," Norma said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just in her own photo, but surrounded by all the children she's saved through us." Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." They spent the next 3 hours talking. George and Norma shared stories about the children they'd helped, the families they'd supported, and the joy it brought them despite the grief that had motivated it all. They asked Jennifer about her work, about the patients she'd cared for, about Dylan Cooper and Rachel. During dinner, a simple meal of barbecue and homemade sides that Norma had prepared, the conversation turned to the future. "The publicity has made things complicated," George admitted. "We've had thousands of requests for help. We want to help everyone, but it's not possible. We're working with Robert to establish a more formal process, maybe partnering with hospitals to identify cases where our help can make the biggest difference. We're also thinking about going more public with the foundation," Norma added. "Not seeking publicity, but being more transparent so other wealthy people might be inspired to do the same thing. If our secret getting out can motivate others to help children, maybe that's a silver lining." As the evening drew to a close and Jennifer prepared to leave, George said something that would stay with her forever. "Jennifer, and it's no coincidence that you share our daughter's name. You represent the best of what people can be. You're a healer, a protector of children, and someone who values doing the right thing over personal gain. Our daughter would have been about your age if she'd lived. I like to think she would have been someone like you." Jennifer hugged them both, unable to hold back her tears. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for everything you've done. You've saved so many lives." "Thank you for caring," Norma whispered. "Thank you for wanting these families to know they were loved." As Jennifer drove home that night, her heart was full. She had set out months ago simply trying to solve a mystery, to give families a chance to say thank you. What she'd found was something much more profound, a testament to the power of turning grief into grace, of channeling loss into love. The secret of Heartstrings Foundation was no longer a secret, but the truth behind it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The autumn of 2022 brought changes that rippled far beyond Jennifer's expectations. The story of George and Norma Strait's decades of anonymous giving had evolved from a news headline into something much more significant. A cultural moment that challenged people to rethink how they understood charity, fame, and the meaning of true generosity. Jennifer returned to work at Texas Children's Hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't share the details of her evening with the Straits. They had asked her to keep that meeting private, but the experience had changed her. She looked at each patient differently now, understanding more deeply that behind every sick child was a family, struggling not just with medical challenges, but with fear, financial burden, and the desperate hope that somehow things would work out. In October, the hospital administration called a staff meeting. Linda Martinez, the chief financial officer, whom Jennifer had spoken with about Dylan Cooper's anonymous donation, stood at the front of the conference room with an announcement that left the assembled nurses and doctors stunned. "I'm pleased to announce that Texas Children's Hospital has received a $5 million endowment from the Strait Family Foundation, the newly renamed and restructured version of Heartstrings Foundation. This endowment will establish a permanent fund to assist families who cannot afford critical pediatric procedures." The room erupted in applause. Linda continued, "The Straits have also challenged other hospitals across Texas and the nation to establish similar funds. They've pledged to match donations dollar for dollar, up to $10 million for any hospital that creates a pediatric financial assistance program." Jennifer felt tears welling up. The Straits had taken the unwanted publicity and transformed it into a catalyst for systemic change. Rather than simply continuing their private giving, they were leveraging their exposure to inspire and enable others to help. Over the following weeks, hospitals across Texas began announcing their own programs. Austin Children's Hospital established a $3 million fund. Dallas Medical Center launched a partnership with local foundations. In Houston, a consortium of wealthy donors came together to create a regional fund that would serve multiple hospitals. The movement spread beyond Texas. In Nashville, country music artists organized a benefit concert that raised $8 million for children's medical care. In Los Angeles, a group of entertainment industry figures established a foundation explicitly inspired by the Strait's example. The ripple effect was extraordinary. Jennifer watched all of this unfold with a mixture of pride and awe. She had wanted to help the Strait's secret remain private, but now she could see that its revelation had accomplished something perhaps even more valuable. It had inspired a movement. In November, Jennifer received a call from a television producer named Catherine Brooks, who worked for a major documentary production company. "Miss Hayes, we're producing a documentary about anonymous charity and the impact of the Strait story. Your name has come up in our research as someone who was instrumental in uncovering their foundation. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" Jennifer's first instinct was to decline. She didn't want recognition for her small role in this story. But then she thought about what the Straits had said about going more public to inspire others. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take your time." Jennifer called Robert Kaufman to ask his advice. To her surprise, he said the Straits had anticipated this call. "They told me to tell you that if you're comfortable participating, they support your decision. They think your perspective as a nurse who sees these struggles firsthand would be valuable. But the choice is entirely yours." After several days of consideration, Jennifer agreed to be interviewed. The documentary team came to San Antonio in December, setting up cameras at the hospital and at Jennifer's home. The interview lasted 3 hours, during which Jennifer talked about her work, about discovering the pattern of anonymous donations, and about what it meant to see families saved from impossible situations. "What did you think when you realized it was George Strait behind all of this?" Catherine Brooks asked. Jennifer thought carefully before answering. "I think I felt a profound sense of rightness. Here was someone who had experienced devastating loss and chose to respond with generosity rather than bitterness. He could have become cynical or withdrawn. Instead, he spent over 2 decades saving children's lives in secret. That's not just charity. That's grace." The documentary, titled Silent Hearts: The Secret Generosity of George Strait, premiered on a major streaming platform in March 2023. It featured interviews with the Straits, with families they had helped, with medical professionals like Jennifer, and with philanthropic experts discussing the broader implications of anonymous giving. The most powerful segment featured George and Norma Strait visiting several of the now-grown children they had helped years earlier. There was Emma Richardson, now in medical school, meeting them again and finally being able to thank them directly. There was a young man named Joshua Martinez, who had received a kidney transplant at age 9 and was now a college graduate working as a teacher. Each meeting was emotional, filled with tears and gratitude. But what struck viewers most was the Straits' consistent humility. When person after person thanked them profusely, George would say variations of the same thing. "We're just glad you're healthy. Live a good life. Help others when you can. That's all the thanks we need." The documentary ended with footage of the Straits visiting Texas Children's Hospital, where they met with current patients and families who were receiving help through the newly established endowment fund. Dylan Cooper, now 10 years old and healthy, presented them with a drawing he had made showing a heart with wings. "This is you," Dylan explained to the Straits. "Hearts with wings, because you fix hearts and you're like angels." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including Jennifer's, as she watched from the doorway. The documentary became a cultural phenomenon, breaking streaming records and sparking national conversations about philanthropy, privacy, and purpose. Think pieces appeared in major publications discussing what the Straits story revealed about American values and the nature of true generosity. But for Jennifer, the most meaningful impact was local and immediate. At Texas Children's Hospital, the endowment fund meant that families like Rachel Cooper's no longer had to face impossible choices alone. The hospital hired additional financial counselors to help families navigate assistance options. The stress that Jennifer had seen on countless parents' faces began to ease, replaced by hope and relief. In April 2023, Jennifer was working a shift when she was called to the emergency department. A 6-year-old girl named Sophia Bennett had been admitted with symptoms of acute heart failure. Her parents, Michael and Lisa Bennett, were young, barely 30, and terrified. Jennifer did her assessment and immediately recognized the severity of Sophia's condition. She needed emergency surgery within 24 hours. The estimated cost was $220,000. But this time, when Jennifer met with the Bennetts to discuss the situation, she had different news to deliver. "Your daughter needs surgery urgently," Jennifer explained. "But I want you to know that this hospital has a fund specifically designed to help families in situations like yours. You'll need to speak with our financial counselor, but I can almost guarantee that the cost will be covered." Lisa Bennett started crying immediately. "We have insurance, but it wouldn't have covered even half of this. We were already trying to figure out which credit cards to max out, whether we could get a second mortgage." "You don't have to do that," Jennifer said gently. "That's what this fund is for." Michael Bennett looked at her with wonder. "Is this that fund from George Strait? The one from the documentary?" "It is," Jennifer confirmed. "The Strait Family Foundation Endowment." "We watched that documentary," Lisa said. "We cried through the whole thing. I never imagined we'd be on the receiving end of that generosity." Sophia's surgery the next day was successful. Dr. Philip Anderson, the same surgeon who had operated on Dylan Cooper, performed the delicate procedure with his characteristic skill. Sophia recovered beautifully, and within 2 weeks, she was home with her family, her heart functioning normally for the first time in her life. The Bennetts sent a letter to the Strait Family Foundation, which Jennifer knew would end up on the wall in that special room at the Straits Ranch, joining dozens of others. In May, Jennifer received an invitation that surprised her. George and Norma Strait were hosting a private gathering at their ranch for families they had helped over the years, and for medical professionals who had been involved in caring for those children. Jennifer was invited as a guest of honor. The gathering took place on a beautiful Saturday in late May. Over 100 people gathered on the grounds of the Strait Ranch. Children who were now healthy adults, parents who had faced their worst nightmares and survived, doctors and nurses who had cared for these patients, and George and Norma at the center of it all. Jennifer arrived early and found the Straits setting up tables and chairs, refusing to let the catering staff do all the work themselves. "Jennifer," Norma called out when she spotted her, "come help me with these centerpieces." For the next hour, Jennifer worked alongside Norma, arranging wildflowers in mason jars for each table. They talked about everything, about the documentary's impact, about new families being helped through the hospital fund, about how the Straits were adjusting to their philanthropy being public knowledge. "It's been strange," Norma admitted. "For so long, our giving was this private thing between us and God. Now everyone knows, and sometimes it feels like we've lost something precious. But then I see the ripple effects. Other people helping, more children being saved. And I think maybe this is what was meant to happen all along." As guests began arriving, Jennifer watched the reunions with joy. Dylan Cooper and Rachel arrived. Dylan, now a confident 10-year-old, who immediately started playing with other children. Emma Richardson came with her parents, wearing her white medical school coat with pride. Joshua Martinez brought his wife and infant daughter. There were families Jennifer hadn't met before. Children helped years ago who had grown into adults living full lives. A 25-year-old woman named Michelle Harris, who had received a heart transplant at age 8 and was now a social worker. A 19-year-old man named Christopher Davis, who had survived cancer thanks to treatment the Straits had funded and was now in college studying biomedical engineering. Each person had a story. Each life had been saved or transformed by the quiet generosity of two people who had refused to let their grief destroy them. During lunch, George stood to address the gathering. He didn't use a microphone. He simply stood among his guests and spoke from the heart. Norma and I wanted to bring you all together because each of you represents something precious to us. When we lost our daughter Jennifer over 36 years ago, we thought the pain would destroy us. For a long time, we didn't know how to survive it. But then we started helping children like you, and we discovered something important. We couldn't bring Jennifer back, and we couldn't erase our pain, but we could honor her memory by making sure other children got the chances she didn't have. We could turn our grief into something that gave life, instead of took it. Looking at all of you now, healthy, thriving, living good lives, this is our reward. This is why we did what we did, not for recognition or gratitude, though we appreciate both. We did it because you deserve to live, and we had the means to help make that happen. Now that our secret is out, we're glad it's inspired others to help too. But I want you all to know something important. You don't have to be wealthy to make a difference. You don't have to donate millions of dollars to change someone's life. Sometimes the most important help is just showing up for someone, listening to them, caring about their struggle. Every person here, every parent who fought for their child, every doctor who gave their best care, every nurse who provided comfort. He looked directly at Jennifer. You're all heroes in this story. Thank you for being part of our family. The gathering continued into the evening, with children playing on the ranch grounds, adults sharing stories and forming friendships born of shared experiences, and the Straits moving among their guests with genuine warmth and interest in each person. As the sun set over the Texas hill country, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jennifer found herself standing on the porch of the ranch house next to Patricia Wilson, who had come as Jennifer's guest. "This is something special," Patricia said quietly. "In all my years of nursing, I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I," Jennifer agreed. "This is what love looks like when it's bigger than just one family. This is grief transformed into grace." Rachel Cooper joined them, Dylan running past, chasing another child. "I keep thinking about how close I came to losing him," Rachel said. "If it weren't for the Straits, Dylan would have died. I would have watched my son die because I couldn't afford to save him. Now he's running and playing and talking about wanting to be a marine biologist. How do you adequately thank someone for giving you your child's life?" "I think you just did," Jennifer said, gesturing to where Dylan was laughing with other children. "Living well, raising him to be a good person, that's the thanks they want." As the gathering wound down and guests began to depart, George and Norma stood by the gate, hugging each person goodbye. When Jennifer's turn came, Norma held her tightly. "Thank you for respecting our privacy when you first discovered our secret," Norma whispered. "And thank you for helping tell our story in a way that honors Jennifer's memory and inspires others. You've been a blessing to us." George shook her hand, then pulled her into a hug as well. "You're always welcome here, Jennifer. You're family now." Driving home that night, Jennifer thought about the winding path that had led her from curious nurse to unexpected guardian of a beautiful secret, to witness of a movement that was changing how people thought about generosity and purpose. She had started this journey simply wanting to give families a chance to say thank you. What she had found was so much more, a testament to the power of love to transcend loss, the capacity of human generosity to ripple outward in ways no one can predict, and the profound truth that our greatest pain can become our greatest purpose if we're brave enough to transform it. The story wasn't over. More children would need help. More families would face impossible choices. But now, there was a network of support, inspired by two people who had turned their worst tragedy into decades of quiet miracles. Jennifer pulled into her driveway and sat in her car for a moment, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, she thought, Jennifer Strait was watching the legacy of her short life touch countless others. And down here on Earth, her parents were ensuring that legacy would continue, one saved life at a time. By the summer of 2024, the landscape of pediatric charitable care in America had been fundamentally transformed. What had begun as one couple's private mission of healing had become a nationwide movement that bridged the gap between families in crisis and the medical care their children desperately needed. Jennifer Hayes stood in the lobby of Texas Children's Hospital on a humid July morning, waiting for a group of visitors who would be touring the facility. At 39 years old, with 15 years of nursing experience behind her, she had recently been promoted to Patient Care Coordinator for the Strait Family Endowment Fund, a newly created position that combined her clinical expertise with her passion for helping families navigate the overwhelming intersection of medical crisis and financial hardship. The position had been offered to her by the hospital administration, but Jennifer knew the Straits themselves had suggested her for the role. It was a way of honoring the journey they had all taken together, from her initial investigation to their eventual friendship and the broader movement their story had inspired. The visitors arriving that morning were a delegation from hospitals across the Southwest. Administrators, financial counselors, and medical professionals who wanted to learn how Texas Children's Hospital had implemented its assistance program so effectively. Since the establishment of the Strait Endowment, the hospital had helped 237 families afford critical procedures. The waiting list for non-emergency cases had dropped from 8 months to less than 6 weeks. The stress-related complications that Jennifer had so often seen in families facing financial devastation had decreased dramatically. Jennifer led the group through the hospital, explaining the systems they had developed. "The key is early intervention," she told them as they walked through the gleaming corridors. "We identify families who might struggle financially at the moment of diagnosis, not after they've already gone into debt trying to figure out solutions. Our financial counselors meet with every family within 24 hours of admission to assess their situation and explain what resources are available." A hospital administrator from Phoenix raised her hand. "How do you determine which families receive assistance? Surely you can't help everyone." "We use a comprehensive needs assessment that considers income, existing debt, insurance coverage, and the cost of the required procedure," Jennifer explained. "But here's what makes our program unique. We don't just look at numbers. We consider the whole family situation. A single mother working 2 jobs might technically be above the poverty line, but still unable to afford a $150,000 surgery. Our program has flexibility built in to help families who fall through the cracks of traditional assistance." She led them to the pediatric cardiac unit, where they observed the newly renovated family waiting area. Comfortable furniture, a children's play area, private consultation rooms, and a small kitchen where families could prepare meals created an environment that felt more like a community center than a hospital. This renovation was funded by additional donations inspired by the documentary about the Straits, Jennifer explained. "We realized that financial assistance was only part of what families needed. They also needed physical and emotional support during what might be weeks or months of their child's treatment." In one of the private consultation rooms, They met with Rachel Cooper, who had volunteered to share her family's story. Dylan, now 12 years old, sat beside his mother, healthy and thriving, wearing a T-shirt from his school's science club. Rachel spoke eloquently about their experience 5 years earlier, the terror of Dylan's diagnosis, the crushing realization that she couldn't afford to save her son's life, and then the miracle of anonymous help that had given Dylan a future. "I thought I was alone," Rachel said, her voice steady but emotional. "I thought my son was going to die because I was poor. But someone I didn't know cared enough to help. That changed everything. Not just Dylan's health, but my entire understanding of what's possible when people choose compassion over indifference." Dylan added his own perspective. "Because I lived, I get to do things I love. I want to study marine biology in college. I want to help protect the ocean. None of that would be possible if I died when I was 7. Someone gave me the chance to have dreams." After the delegation left, Jennifer returned to her office to review new applications for assistance. Her job now involved evaluating requests, coordinating with financial counselors, and following up with families after their children's procedures. It was demanding work, but it filled her with purpose. Her phone rang. It was Norma Strait. Over the past 2 years, Jennifer had developed a genuine friendship with George and Norma. They spoke regularly, sometimes about foundation business, but often just about life. Norma would call to check on Jennifer's mother, who was battling arthritis. Jennifer would send photos of Charlie, knowing Norma loved dogs. They had become part of each other's lives in a way that transcended their initial connection. "Jennifer, dear, how are you?" Norma's warm voice came through the phone. "I'm good, Norma. Just finished giving a hospital tour to administrators from Arizona and New Mexico. They're setting up programs modeled after ours." "That's wonderful. Listen, I'm calling because George and I would like you to come to dinner next week. There's something we want to discuss with you." "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. We just have a proposition for you." The following Tuesday, Jennifer drove out to the Strait Ranch, a journey that had become familiar over the past years. The gate opened automatically now. George had given her the access code, saying family didn't need to call ahead. Inside the house, she found George and Norma in the living room with Robert Kaufman and 2 other people she didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and professional attire, and a younger man with glasses and a laptop. "Jennifer, come sit," George said, gesturing to a chair. "I want to introduce you to some people. This is Dr. Margaret Foster, who runs a national nonprofit focused on pediatric healthcare access. And this is Daniel Ortiz, who's a policy advisor with experience in healthcare legislation." Jennifer shook hands with both, curious about where this was going. Norma took over. "Jennifer, over the past 2 years, we've seen the impact that our going public with our giving has had. Dozens of hospitals have started similar programs. Thousands of children have received help who wouldn't have otherwise. But we keep coming back to a fundamental problem. We're addressing symptoms, not the disease." George leaned forward. "The disease is a healthcare system that forces families to choose between their child's life and financial ruin. We can help hundreds or even thousands of children through our foundation, but there are hundreds of thousands of kids who need help. We can't save them all personally." Dr. Foster spoke up. "What George and Norma are proposing is much bigger than one foundation, or even a network of hospital programs. They want to advocate for systemic change in how pediatric medical care is funded in America." Jennifer felt her heart rate quicken. "That's ambitious." "It's necessary," George said firmly. "We've been meeting with legislators, healthcare experts, and other philanthropists. We want to push for legislation that would create a federal fund for pediatric catastrophic care, something that would ensure no child in America dies or suffers because their family can't afford treatment. Daniel Ortiz opened his laptop. "We've been drafting a proposal we're calling the Pediatric Care Access Act. It would establish a fund that supplements private insurance and state Medicaid programs to cover gaps in pediatric care. It would be funded through a small tax on pharmaceutical companies and medical device manufacturers. The companies that profit from healthcare would contribute to ensuring children have access to that healthcare." "It's a long shot," Norma admitted. "Getting any healthcare legislation through Congress is incredibly difficult. But we have something powerful. A story that has already captured public attention. George's willingness to use his platform and our story to advocate for this could make a real difference." George looked directly at Jennifer. "And that's where you come in. We want you to be the clinical voice of this movement. You've seen firsthand what happens to families caught in the gaps of our healthcare system. You've helped implement one of the most successful hospital assistance programs in the country. We want you to work with Dr. Foster and Daniel to help develop this proposal and then advocate for it publicly." Jennifer sat back, overwhelmed. "I'm just a nurse. I'm not a policy expert or a public advocate." "You're not just a nurse," Norma said firmly. "You're someone who cares deeply about these families. You're someone who took the time to investigate and understand the scope of this problem. You're someone who respected our privacy when you could have sought personal gain. And someone who has dedicated yourself to helping children. That's exactly the voice we need." "Think about it," George added. "You don't have to answer now. But we believe you could make a real difference in this fight." Jennifer did think about it. For several days, she wrestled with the decision. Taking on this role would mean stepping away from direct patient care, at least partially. It would mean entering the messy world of politics and policy, dealing with legislators and lobbyists and special interests. It would mean public speaking, media interviews, and scrutiny. But it would also mean potentially helping millions of children instead of hundreds. It would mean fighting for systemic change that could eliminate the crisis she had seen repeat itself countless times in her nursing career. She thought about Rachel Cooper's face when she learned her son needed surgery she couldn't afford. She thought about the parents she had comforted who didn't have a mysterious benefactor to save their children. She thought about the children who had died or suffered not because medicine couldn't help them, but because money stood in the way. A week later, Jennifer called Norma. "I'll do it." The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Jennifer transitioned her hospital coordinator role to a part-time position, allowing her to focus on the policy initiative. She worked closely with Dr. Foster and Daniel Ortiz, helping them understand the clinical realities of pediatric care and the specific ways families fell through the cracks of the current system. In October 2024, the Strait Family Foundation officially announced the Pediatric Care Access Initiative. George and Norma held a press conference, with Jennifer standing beside them, explaining the proposal and calling on Congress to act. "We've been fortunate enough to help hundreds of children over the years," George said to the assembled reporters. "But that's not enough. Every child in America deserves access to the medical care they need, regardless of their family's financial situation. That's not radical. That's basic human decency." The response was immediate and divided. Supporters praised the initiative as a moral imperative. The American Academy of Pediatrics endorsed the proposal. Parent advocacy groups rallied behind it. Several celebrities and public figures added their voices of support. But there was also opposition. Some politicians characterized it as government overreach. Pharmaceutical companies pushed back against the proposed funding mechanism. Conservative think tanks argued it would create unsustainable costs. Jennifer found herself in the middle of heated debates on news programs, in congressional hearings, and at public forums. It was uncomfortable and sometimes frightening, but she persisted. always bringing the conversation back to real families and real children. In December, she testified before a congressional subcommittee on health care. Sitting at the witness table, facing rows of legislators and cameras, she told Dylan Cooper's story, how a 7-year-old boy almost died, not because medicine couldn't save him, but because his single mother working 2 jobs couldn't afford $180,000. Dylan Cooper is alive today because someone with extraordinary resources chose to help his family, Jennifer told the committee. But why should whether a child lives or dies depend on finding a wealthy benefactor? Why should parents have to start GoFundMe pages or hold bake sales to save their children's lives? We're the wealthiest nation in the world. We can do better than this. Several legislators were moved to tears. Videos of her testimony went viral online. The hashtag #PediatricCareForAll began trending on social media. By early 2025, momentum was building. A bipartisan group of senators introduced legislation based on the initiative's proposal. Town halls were held across the country, where families shared their stories. George Strait performed at a benefit concert in Washington, D.C. that raised millions for advocacy efforts. Jennifer traveled the country, speaking at medical conferences, parent groups, and community gatherings. Everywhere she went, she met families who had faced or were facing the impossible choice between their child's life and financial ruin. Each story reinforced her commitment to this fight. In March 2025, she spoke at a rally in Dallas, where over 10,000 people gathered to support the Pediatric Care Access Act. Standing on stage, looking out at the sea of faces, she saw parents holding photos of their children, some living, some lost. She saw medical professionals in scrubs who had left their shifts to attend. She saw young people who had themselves been saved by charitable care and wanted to ensure future children had guaranteed access. This isn't about politics, Jennifer told the crowd. This is about our values as a society. What do we believe children deserve? Do we believe every child deserves the chance to grow up healthy? Or do we believe only children from wealthy families deserve that chance? Because right now, our system reflects the latter. And that's unacceptable. The crowd erupted in cheers. Among them were George and Norma Strait, standing anonymously in the crowd, unwilling to make the rally about themselves, but needing to be there to show support. Backstage after the rally, Jennifer found them waiting. "You were magnificent," Norma said, embracing her tightly. "I just told the truth," Jennifer replied. "That's what makes you magnificent," George said. "You don't do this for attention or recognition. You do it because it's right. That's what this fight needs." As spring turned to summer in 2025, the Pediatric Care Access Act faced its critical votes in Congress. The outcome was uncertain. The bill had both strong support and fierce opposition. Jennifer and the entire team worked tirelessly, meeting with undecided legislators, mobilizing grassroots support, and keeping media attention focused on the human impact of the issue. In late August, Jennifer was at the hospital, reviewing cases, when her phone rang. It was Daniel Ortiz. "Turn on C-SPAN," he said, his voice trembling. "The Senate is voting." Jennifer found an empty conference room and turned on the television. She watched as senators cast their votes one by one. The count was close, so close that it came down to the final 3 votes. When the presiding officer announced 60 yeas, 40 nays, the bill passes, Jennifer burst into tears. The Pediatric Care Access Act had cleared the Senate. It still needed to pass the House and be signed by the president, but the hardest hurdle had been cleared. Within hours, her phone was flooded with calls and messages. George and Norma called to celebrate. Dr. Foster texted congratulations. Rachel Cooper sent a video of Dylan jumping up and down with excitement. But the message that meant the most came from a woman named Margaret Williams, whose 6-year-old daughter had died 3 years earlier because the family couldn't afford experimental cancer treatment that wasn't covered by insurance. "My daughter Emily didn't survive," Margaret wrote. "But because of this law, other children will. Other families won't have to watch their child die, knowing that money is the only thing standing between death and life. Thank you for fighting for our children." Jennifer read the message through tears, thinking about all the Emilys out there. The children who had been lost, the families who had been broken by a system that valued profit over human life. The House passed the Pediatric Care Access Act in November 2025, and in December, the President signed it into law. The ceremony at the White House included George and Norma Strait, Jennifer Hayes, Dr. Margaret Foster, and representatives from the families whose stories had helped pass the legislation. Dylan Cooper, now 13 years old, stood beside the president as he signed the bill. When the president handed Dylan the pen used to sign the act, the image was captured by every major news outlet, a living testament to why the fight had mattered. In the aftermath of the bill's passage, Jennifer returned to Texas and to her work at the hospital. The new law wouldn't go into full effect for another year, as implementation details were worked out and funding mechanisms were established. But knowing it was coming transformed every conversation she had with struggling families. Help is on the way, she could tell them now. Soon, no family will have to face this alone. On a quiet Saturday morning in late December 2025, Jennifer drove out to the Strait Ranch one more time. George and Norma had invited her for what they called a family celebration, a small gathering to reflect on everything that had happened over the past 6 years since Dylan Cooper's surgery had first caught Jennifer's attention. The gathering was small, just Jennifer, the Straits, Robert Kaufman, Dr. Foster, and a few of the families whose children had been helped along the way. They ate barbecue, shared stories, and laughed together in the warm Texas winter sunshine. At one point, Jennifer found herself alone with George on the porch, looking out over the ranch land. They stood in comfortable silence for a while before George spoke. "You know, when our Jennifer died, I thought the pain would never end. I thought we'd never find purpose or peace again. And now?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Now I know that grief never fully goes away, but it can be transformed. Every child we've helped, every family that's been saved from crisis, every small victory in this bigger fight, that's our daughter's legacy living on. She only lived 13 years, but through us and through this work, she's touched thousands of lives." "Tens of thousands," Jennifer corrected gently. "Maybe millions when this law is fully implemented." George nodded, his eyes moist. "She would have been 49 this year. Sometimes I wonder what she would have become, what career she would have chosen, what kind of person she would be. But then I think maybe this is what she became. Maybe this work, this legacy, is her life continuing in a different form." Jennifer put her hand on his arm. "I think she'd be proud of you both. I think she'd be proud of everyone here who fought to make sure other children got chances she didn't have." That evening, as guests began to leave, Norma pulled Jennifer aside. She handed her a wrapped gift, a framed photograph Jennifer had never seen before. "This is Jennifer," Norma said softly. "Our daughter. We've shown her picture in documentaries and public events, but this particular photo has always been private. We want you to have it." The photo showed a beautiful teenage girl with long brown hair, sitting on a horse, laughing at something off camera. Her joy was infectious, captured perfectly in that frozen moment. "She loved horses," Norma continued. "She loved music and reading and making people laugh. She was kind to everyone, always standing up for kids who were picked on at school. always including people who were left out. She would have loved knowing that her life inspired all of this. Jennifer hugged Norma tightly. "Thank you for trusting me with her story. Thank you for trusting me with this whole journey. Thank you for caring enough to search for the truth," Norma replied. "Thank you for respecting that truth when you found it. And thank you for helping us turn a tragedy into a legacy of hope." Driving home that night, the framed photograph carefully secured on her passenger seat, Jennifer reflected on the extraordinary path her curiosity had set in motion 6 years earlier. She had simply wanted to find out who was helping families like Rachel Cooper's. What she had found was so much more. A story of love surviving loss, of grief transformed into grace, and of how one family's private pain had sparked a movement that would protect millions of children. The next morning, Jennifer hung the photograph in her home office, right above her desk where she would see it every day. Jennifer Strait's smile would serve as a reminder of why the work mattered, why fighting for vulnerable children was always worth the effort, and how a life cut short could still leave an immeasurable legacy. She thought about all the children who would now receive care under the new law. Children like Dylan Cooper, who would grow up to chase their dreams instead of being stolen by preventable deaths. She thought about parents who would no longer face the unbearable choice between their child's life and financial ruin. And she thought about George and Norma Strait, who had taken the worst moment of their lives and transformed it into decades of quiet miracles, and then into a public fight for justice that would echo through generations. The secret of Heartstrings Foundation was no longer a secret, but the truth behind it had proven more powerful than any secret could be. It had inspired a nation, changed a broken system, and proved that love, even love born from unspeakable grief, could move mountains. Jennifer sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. There were emails from families newly diagnosed with catastrophic illnesses looking for guidance and hope. There was work to be done helping implement the new law, ensuring it fulfilled its promise to protect children. The fight wasn't over. It would never be completely over, because there would always be children who needed help and families who needed support. But now, there was a foundation of support that hadn't existed before, built on the legacy of one little girl who died too young, sustained by parents who refused to let grief destroy them, and strengthened by everyone who had joined the fight to ensure no child would die simply because their family couldn't afford to save them. Jennifer began typing responses, making plans, coordinating next steps. Outside her window, the Texas sun rose over San Antonio, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, full of possibilities, shaped by the power of love to transform tragedy into hope. And in that moment, Jennifer knew that this was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The mystery she had set out to solve 6 years ago had led her to her true calling, not just caring for children in a hospital, but fighting to ensure every child had the chance to grow up healthy, safe, and full of dreams. The legacy of Jennifer Strait lived on, written in the lives of countless children who would never know her name, but would forever benefit from the love her parents refused to let die with her. And that, Jennifer thought as she worked, was the most beautiful kind of immortality. A life that never stopped saving other lives. Love that never stopped multiplying. Grace that never stopped flowing outward into a world that desperately needed it. The story had come full circle. From tragedy to secret generosity, to public revelation, to systemic change. But in many ways, it was just beginning. Every child saved, every family helped, every life transformed was another chapter in an ongoing story of how choosing love over bitterness, generosity over grief, and hope over despair could literally change the world. Jennifer Hayes had sought to solve a mystery. What she had found was a calling, a family, and a movement that would ensure George and Norma Strait's quiet miracles would continue long after they were gone, protecting children they would never meet. In ways they could never have imagined that terrible day in 1986 when they lost their daughter. But perhaps they had never really lost her at all. Perhaps Jennifer Strait lived on in every child who survived because of her parents' generosity. In every parent who didn't have to choose between their child's life and financial ruin. In every small act of kindness inspired by their example. Love, Jennifer had learned, was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of transcending death, transforming pain, inspiring change, and saving lives for generations to come. And that was a truth worth fighting for, worth sharing, and worth building a legacy upon.